every single NRL Grand Final ranked. In 1997, a divided competition that had been brewing for 2 years took place, and there were times where we thought the competition would never unite again. But in fact, the very next year it did, under the banner of the National Rugby League, and has ever since. Today, we are going to be ranking every single grand final from the NRL era. There have been 24 NRL era grand finals spanning from 1998 to 2021, with the fifth set to take place in 2022. Before we get started though, there were 2 of these grand finals I weren't alive for, probably about 5 of them I didn't watch at the time. So my perception of these are going to be a little different to someone who was alive and well and remembers watching these as they happen. Obviously, watching in hindsight is a lot different to watching live, etc. And there are people out there who are going to be younger than me who may have watched all of these grand finals, but still don't have that same live perception that I did. So obviously, things are going to be a little bit different, and this is just my personal preference. So I want you guys after this video to comment below your favourite NRL era grand final, and if you have the time, hey, rank them 24-1. I'll give it a look. But other than that, we're about to get started. As I said, there are 24 grand finals here, and I know with the Rugby League World Cup ranked video, that ended up going for about half an hour. I don't want that here. So basically from 24 to 11, I think I'm sort of just going to name them out, maybe give one little piece of information. I don't want to be rambling on for too long, but then top 10, we might go a little bit deeper. But other than that, let's get into the rankings. Okay, so at 24, we have the grand final from the year I was born, 2000. The Brisbane Broncos would defeat the Sydney Roosters. This was in an Olympic year, and of course the Olympic year where the Olympics took place in Sydney. Sort of funny that this one was Brisbane versus Sydney. That was the year, obviously, the Sydney Olympics, but it's recently been announced that in 2032, the Olympics will be taking place in Brisbane. So there you go, I guess. If the Roosters would have won this one, I guess it would have been fitting for that reason. They also had not won a premiership since 1975. 2 years later, they would indeed go on to break their streak. A bit more on that later. But yeah, just a bit of an inconsequential grand final for me. I'd say probably the most memorable thing was probably the fact that Luke Phillips should have got the Clive Churchill medal, but didn't. On to 23 now, 1998, Brisbane flogging the Bulldogs. I think the Bulldogs were winning at half-time, but Brisbane went on to win 38-12. Just another bit of Broncos dominance there during a dominant period. 2007, obviously, this premiership doesn't count for Melbourne, neither does 2009, but the grand finals themselves still happen, so I'm going to review them here. Melbourne winning 34 points to 8 against Manly, quite a dominant victory. Brett Stewart getting injured early on, the memorable thing from that grand final. 2011, the Seagulls beating the Warriors. Could have been historic if the Warriors had won. First ever time a team from outside of Australia wins the NRL. And also they finished 6th that year, so it would have been quite the effort. Look, they got to grand final day. It was a big effort. As I said, many Warriors fans in support. I believe they did the haka before the game, but the game itself was pretty inconsequential. Manly never looked like losing this game, to be honest. It ended up 24-10, but Manly just were the dominant side throughout. We move on now to 2012 grand final the year after. Melbourne beating Canterbury Bankstown 14 points to 4 this season, famous for Ben Barber. Barber was contained very well by Melbourne, and that's all they really had to do to win. Half-time score was the full-time score, 14 points to 4, which I think is the only time this has happened in the NRL era. And, you know, if you want a great defensive masterclass and an example of an NRL team parking the bus, so to speak, I know that's a football/soccer term, but if it ever happened, it happened in this grand final here. Melbourne, the masters of in the second half, just sort of shut down completely and stopped the Bulldogs from really doing anything. 19, we do get on to 2009 now. The Storm beating the Eels, of course, the Parramatta won, probably a lot more historic just because of their drought. Especially because they finished 8th and just squeaked into the finals as well. The year of the Hayne Plane, not too dissimilar a story from the 2012 grand final. Melbourne pretty much had their opposition locked down. 2017 now, number 18, another Melbourne Storm grand final, winning 34 points to 6. A dominant display but not necessarily a shocking one. The 8th place Cowboys getting dominated by, arguably on paper, for that whole season, the best NRL team we have seen, the 2017 Storm, maybe. In 17 now, it's the 2018 Grand Final, so the Storm is still involved, but they lose to the Roosters. A little bit of shock value there just because of how easily the Roosters were able to deal with the Storm, but they didn't really look like losing throughout the entirety of this game despite going in as underdogs. That was 2018. 16, 2010, now we're getting a little bit historic, if you will. The Dragons winning their first premiership as St. George Illawarra, their first premiership, if you count St. George Dragons, since 1979. Roosters actually winning at halftime and going on to get flogged in the second half, so not too dissimilar from 1998 there. 15, 2006. This was the last time the Broncos would win a premiership, and it was their first in 6 years, but still that period where they were one of the more dominant sides. 15 points to 8, I guess, is remembered a little bit more now because Brisbane are on a bit of a drought. They're not necessarily one of the best teams in the NRL anymore, so the glory days get brought up a little bit back in 2006, 14, 2002, another historic one now. The Roosters, as I said before, winning their first premiership since 1975. I think the Warriors were leading this one at halftime and then the Roosters came out and flogged them. What's it with a low-scoring game at halftime in a grand final and then the other team just comes out and absolutely blows them off the park in the second half? Famous for that Stacey Jones try. And who was it? I can't remember off the top of my head, but one of the Warriors players tried to take out Brad Fittler while the Warriors were up, and that sort of changed the complexion of the game a bit there. Number 13, 2020. We're about to get onto a grand final soon that wasn't too dissimilar from that. This wasn't that bad of a game, but I think the refereeing was relatively poor overall. 50-50 calls were going to Melbourne in the first half, but they were going to Penrith in the second half to sort of even up the game, in my opinion, and have a bit of an exciting finish, as I think Cameron Smith said on the field. A great performance from Ryan Papenhuyzen, and a bit of a shock as well. Melbourne just dominating the entire first half. And then it was sort of only in the last 20 minutes Penrith hit their stride, so 2020 coming in there. At 13th, now we move on to 12th, which is 2019, so the year before, where the Roosters defeated the Raiders. A lot of controversy here. I personally believe the Roosters still deserve to win that grand final. They were a better team throughout, and I think it was just a solid game of rugby league. If Canberra won, obviously it'd be higher on this list due to the historical value, I guess. But then we move on now to number 11, 2013, the Roosters defeating Manly. Manly winning throughout this game. This was a really just an overall good game of rugby league, entertaining, plenty of tries. You could put down Michael Jennings' try as the big moment, although I think that sort of gets forgotten amongst the other big moments in grand final history a little bit. But overall, just a solid game, and the Roosters winning their first premiership in 11 years, so a little bit of a drought there. On to the top 10 now. In 10th, the 2004 grand final. Brad Fittler's final game. It was the first time the Roosters had finished the season as minor premiers for a long time. This was their third straight grand final. Captain of the Bulldogs, Steve Price, missing out on this one in his final game for the club. Jonathan Thurston having to step in there, obviously giving his grand final ring to Steve Price after the game. Bobcat Andrew Ryan, I believe it was, making, I guess, the game-saving tackle on Michael Crocker towards the end there, and a close game, 16-13. In 9th, the 2003 grand final the year before, the Penrith Panthers winning their first grand final in 12 years. There's a historical significance, 18 points to 6, also memorable for that Scott Sattler tackle. If you go back and watch this game as well, it was played in wet, muddy conditions, and probably of the NRL era itself, the hardest hitting grand final, I would say. Both great defensive efforts across the board from both sides. Obviously, in that wet weather football, you're going to want to be protecting that ball, and that's what we saw there. A bit of a struggle for a while, but Penrith were able to break through on a few occasions. In 8, the 2008 grand final, Manly winning 40 points to 0. I believe this was their first premiership win in 12 years as well, but a lot of it comes down to that shock factor. I don't think anyone was predicting this. Melbourne dominant the year before in the grand final. Melbourne looking dominant throughout the 2008 season. Sure, there were people out there tipping Manly to win this game, but to win it 40-0 in Steve Vivamanzi's last game in the NRL before going to Super League. I don't think anyone was really predicting this. In number 7, 2001, this is the one I said it's not too dissimilar from 2020, but this one happened before, and I think overall was just a more enjoyable game. Newcastle beating Parramatta 30 points to 24, I believe. Newcastle up 24-0. Parra, they were morals to win this grand final. They got too confident, I think. Newcastle straight out of the gates, 24-0. I think it was either the halftime score or it was 24-0 at some point in the first half. Parramatta trying to claw back, but in the end, losing by 6 points after all of that happened. Absolute madness. In number 6, we've got 2021, the Panthers beating the Rabbitohs 14 points to 12. You got the Stephen Crichton moment. You got Penrith's first premiership since 2003, that historical significance there too. Wayne Bennett's last game in charge of the South Sydney Rabbitohs. Adam Reynolds' final game for the Rabbitohs, unfortunately missing that conversion that would have tied the game up. But overall, they just gave it everything, these two teams. So many close moments. So many close calls. This one probably in everyone's minds after the next couple of years might not go down as one of the most historic grand finals of all time. Maybe that Stephen Crichton intercept moment, yeah, but it's a shame because this game should be remembered from minute 1 to minute 80, just a close, really well-fought game of football by two teams who deserve to be there, which I don't think you always get in a grand final. Number 5, it is 2005, the Benji flick pass, the Pat Richards palm, the try. The Tigers winning their first ever grand final as West Tigers, but if you want to count historically, their first premiership since Balmain in 1969. Tigers fans, Balmain Tigers fans in particular, actually Western Suburbs Magpies fans have been waiting even longer. They've been waiting a long time for this, and the Tigers got it done in 2005 when they really were not tipped to. I think this is probably the most unlikely team during a season to then go on and win the comp, maybe Penrith in 2003. On to number 4 now. The South Sydney Rabbitohs breaking their 43-year drought to win their 21st premiership and extend their tally as the team with the most premierships in the NRL. Winning that game, I believe it was 30 points to 6 in the end. They sort of, I think the Bulldogs sort of shut up shop a little bit at the end and South Sydney ran away with it and got the victory there. Number 3, 1999, the Melbourne Storm coming back against the St. George Illawarra Dragons. This was technically the first grand final for both sides. Technically, St. George Illawarra's first season as a club, made the grand final. They were favourites leading into the grand final, winning for most of the game. But Jamie Ainscoe's tackle on Craig Smith, I believe it was, the penalty try, wow. It was just crazy stuff, a crazy ending there. And Melbourne's first premiership as well. Number 2, talking about first premierships, 49 years, 50 seasons in the competition. The Cronulla Sutherland Sharks defeats the Melbourne Storm. I believe that one was 14 points to 12 as well. I believe it was Ricky Latelli who made that tackle right at the end to secure the game. Andrew Fafita's try as well, though, just the underdog victory as well. I think a lot of people were tipping Melbourne in this one. It just creates a great story for a grand final, doesn't it? And of course, number 1, the year before, 2015, the North Queensland Cowboys winning their first premiership against their big rivals, the Broncos, in an amazing game, I'd say, for the most part. The second half itself, until the final moments, was a bit boring. Brisbane tried to do what Melbourne did 3 years earlier in 2012 and sort of shut up shop and just park the bus. It worked right up until the siren sounded when Cole Felt, of course, went over for the Cowboys. Jonathan Thurston missing the conversion, but then kicking that field goal and winning the Clive Churchill medal. So there we have it. Ranked from 24 to first. Every NRL grand final ranked. As I said, I want you to comment below your rankings, or if you don't feel like typing them all out, just your favourite grand final of the NRL era. Other than that, please share this around with your mates. Give this video a like. Subscribe to Rugby League in My Opinion on YouTube. As I said, leave a comment below.